2.
Hi, I'm Issie Barratt. I'm the Artistic Director of the National Youth Jazz Collective, and I want to welcome you to the first of a whole week of jazz on a summer's evening. And we're thrilled to have launched our National Youth Jazz Collective Summer School today. We've got 63 young musicians working with us in 8 combos, being led by leading members of the international jazz scene. And we're also going to be joined later on in the week by Michael Price, who writes a lot of television music, including Unforgotten and the Dracula for BBC adaptation, and also Olga Fitzroy, who is already known to most of you. You might not realise it, but she's doing the Crown. She's the engineer for the Crown, and also Coldplay as well. So she's going to be joining us and doing some recording as well. And we've got 8 ambassadors who are supporting the teams as well. We've got a lot of alumni, which is really exciting. We're 13 years old this year, and so this is the first year in a way we've got that full cycle, including our very dear Nick Brown. Nick, come and say a quick hello. Nick Brown's our programme manager. He's an alumnus who was with us a few years ago, 2013, I think. Nick, are you there? Do you want to say a quick hello?
Yes, I am. Hello, everybody.
How you doing? How
welcome.
do you feel it's going? How do you feel it's going?
We're getting there. We're learning this new world of online that we're in, but we're very excited about some of the things that we've managed to achieve today, and just seeing how much more we can achieve. And I'm so thrilled to be here.
Brilliant.
So yeah.
Well, we're going to be doing some sharings from tomorrow onwards, aren't we? We thought we'd give the young musicians the opportunity to get going and start to make some music together, and then we're going to be recording some of those sessions as well, so we're going to invite some of them every evening to have a bit of a conversation and do a bit of a sharing. But it wouldn't be an NYJC Summer School without our guest, who I'm going to welcome to the stage, and I'm really thrilled to be having this conversation because I'd like to welcome Julian Joseph, OBE, who is one of our vice presidents and has been such a fundamental support and inspiration and contributor to NYJC since we started in 2007. Julian, welcome, and I'm so thrilled that you could join us on day 1 of our online summer school.
Bless you. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I can't believe it's been 13 years. So quick, just like that. Incredible.
Can you remember what it was like, life before there was an NYJC? What was the
There was no life before NYJC, Izzy. Come on. No, and NYJC is such an important part of the jazz framework and a way of encouraging youngsters and, you know, young people, young musicians who are really interested in what the jazz craft offers, but I think also just an opportunity for like-minded, young, talented people to meet one another. You know, so much comes from that, and also to interconnect with the scene and many of the great artists that you regularly get to instruct and share, you know, every summer. So it's a wonderful opportunity. And I think those connections are lifelong.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering actually if you yourself could demonstrate that through some of the connections that you made when you were their age, and there are people that you still work with when you met them in your teens. Might you tell us a bit about what was happening for you in your teens and how you were growing as a musician?
Well, in my teens, I was very, very into jazz. I mean, I was into jazz before my teens. And because I have 2 brothers, an older one and a younger one, John and James, and the 3 of us, I don't know what it is about jazz, but we just took to it like ducks to water. So most people, our teachers, most of the grown-ups and adults that we engaged with thought we were alien people. Not that liking and loving jazz is an alien pursuit. I don't think it is. It feels completely normal to me, but the expectation at that young age is that it's for older people. And I don't know necessarily that I feel that way. I think possibly because of its sophistication or its areas of sophistication, the expectation is that that's what it is. And also the way it's portrayed to the general public is that older people play it and older people listen to it. That, of course, on the ground is not the sole truth. It's just a tiny microcosm of what jazz represents to many people. But for me, in my teenage years, I guess from the age of about 13, I had already started leading bands at my school with my teachers who were jazz musicians. And, you know, Trevor Tompkins would play drums, Phil Bates would play the bass. And then, you know, and we had another teacher called Andrew Harrod, who was a really great bass player and knew loads of voicings on the piano. So he showed me a lot of stuff. Trevor showed me a lot of things. I had a fantastic, lots of great teachers actually. And I think when you're, James has joined us. Welcome,
Yeah,
James.
I know.
So I think when you show enthusiasm for something, then, you know, you can't help but, there's an old saying, whether you're religious or not, God helps those who help themselves. And when someone sees you taking stuff and, you know, really trying to find out about music and your interest is sucking things in, everybody wants to help you. So I was fortunate. I had a lot of support. And, you know, Olaf Vass, he ran a workshop and a big band at my school after hours. So I would hang around afterwards and see what was going on. And, you know, and also I think at that time, jazz was still very much part of the musical cultural landscape of how you learned things. Most of the studio scene was full of jazz musicians, all peripatetic teachers, except for a very few who were classical musicians, were jazz musicians. So there was a great atmosphere of encouragement and learning. So that's what I felt anyway. And as I was getting older, I started to go to different kinds of workshops and things. And I heard about one from my English teacher, Mrs. Peterson, who encouraged me to go to a weekend arts college. And I went there, it was in Kentish Town at the time, and Ian Carr, who was one of my absolute heroes, was running that workshop. So I attended that because a friend of mine who plays drums for Courtney Pine, Robert Forgeau, he was already there, and he's a year younger than me at school, and we've been playing together for ages. So I was very nervous about going there. And when I got there, I met some really, really great musicians. I think about a year after I was there, Mark Mondesi joined, and Michael Mondesi, and we played together all the time. And, you know, it's, at that time, you're very industrious. If there's stuff you can do, you do it. I was writing a lot of music at that time. I've been writing since I was 10. So I had lots of pieces of music, and I would, after the session with Ian, with all that music we learned, I would have more music, and I would have a session afterwards with Mark and you know, different people, and Michael, and then other people started coming down. You know, Steve Williamson would come down, Courtney Pine would come down, you know, everybody, man. Cleveland Watkins, Trevor Watkins. We'd just hang, man. We'd hang, we'd learn music, work on it, do it the best we can. Then, when I was about 17, I met Mulgrew Miller because I went to Ronnie Scott's and just spoke to him and heard him play. Huge fan of his, and I said, you know, I play the piano as well, you know, and he's like, as well as what, Julian? You know, and from that moment we were friends, and he used to come down to the rehearsals with me and Courtney and those guys, and then Terence Blanchard, Don Harrison, Jean Toussaint, you know, and so after that, you know, all the connections, the tentacles were out there. They're what we met, Jacob Pastorius, we met all these cats, man, and it was incredible. It was incredible. So I was living on a high, man, just in my teenage years. And it prepared the groundwork for me to pursue the ambition of going to America to study. Art Blakey wrote me a reference. You know.
Wow. How did you first meet Art Blakey?
Well, the guys, I mean, they took me back to meet him. Said, you know, you need to meet Julian, and I would go on the road with them too. Mulgrew would say, come along. And then I'd come along, and, you know, in those days, you know, everybody, there's a great brotherhood, a great kinship. And those guys, they just looked after me. They made sure I was looked after. So by the time I was on tour going to Cheltenham and all this, I'd never been really out of London much, you know, except for the odd trip to, you know, abroad with my mum and my family, but very little. I was mostly just London centric. So yeah, this was a whole new experience for me. And but anyway, those solidified the connections that I was making with musicians here and musicians in the States. So when Winter Marsalis would come over, I'd go and see him. I'd introduce myself. I was quite bold, you know, for someone who I would consider myself quite shy, but when it came to music, I was not shy. I was always bold. I would always just step forward and, you know, say what I needed to say and ask questions. I asked questions like crazy. By the time I reached 27, 28, I was like, I've asked every question. Now I've actually got to try and do something and show that I was listening.
When you were talking about the brotherhood and you were talking about being one of three brothers as well, just at that point, up popped James Joseph, who's come to join us as well. Might we introduce James and also say, I remember there's a lovely story that James told me quite early on when we used to hang out talking about our childhoods, because we've both got that thing in common about, you know, meeting Ian Carr and all that, you know, although we never met for quite a while ourselves, we'd still got lots of common threads. And I remember, James, it's lovely to see you. And that, could you tell us that lovely story about you walking to school singing bass solos?
No, well, what it was, we weren't walking to school. What it was is that we'd be walking to our piano lesson.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And the thing is, we used to walk, the three of us, we used to walk to save up the bus fare so we could buy records at the weekend, you know. And
or whenever, right? Not just the weekend.
Or whenever, you know. So we would walk along, and then, you know, I would do like a drum pattern, and John would do a bass line, and Julian would do the soloing over it, you know. And these three little boys walking across Wandsworth and Clapham Common to get to their piano lesson, and we would just sing stuff, you know. And people used to enjoy it, so and we enjoyed it.
And you still do it now, suddenly out of the middle of nowhere. Yeah. Was there lots of music going on at home, both of you, James? Maybe.
Well, you know, we all play, you know. So, you know, I played. I was playing clarinet, and we all played the piano and guitar. We all played guitar. I played drums, and well, we all played drums. That's right. And Julian, the piano we could never get on, because, you know, Julian would wake up in the morning and then go and play the piano, then he'll have some breakfast, then he'll play the piano, then he'll go to school, and then he'll come back from school, play the piano, have some tea, and then go and play the piano, and then go to bed. And so what was left for us, we couldn't get on the piano. We used to get on the piano to practice for our piano lessons, but, you know, Julian was always on the piano. And, you know, but there was a lot of music, you know, because we used to listen constantly, all three of us. And I mean, especially John and Julian, first of all, until I got a little older, because I'm saying this because we were very young. We were very, very young.
Yeah, by the time you got to about 8, right?
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, we used to watch our dad's band rehearse in the cellar as well. We used to sit on the steps. You know, but I was very, 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 very young. I mean, I was 1 or something like that. And then, but mum really encouraged music. And, you know, when Julian was about 5 or 6, you know, we came home from school, and I was in nursery. John and Julian were at school. And then we walked into the front room, and he said, oh, and ran into the dining room and said, Mum, there's a piano. And she said, yes, and you're all going to learn, you know. And so, you know, there was physical instruments around, but you know, we also used to listen a lot. And we used to listen. And one of the things that we used to do is that we were always interested in the jazz sound of the drums. And, you know, and on television, it was quite wide, you know, the Fred Astaire movies, and, you know, Duke would pop up on television from time to time. And but we were always interested in that sound, even though we were studying classical music, you know. And whenever that sound would come, we would be interested. But Mum, at that time as well, the Oscar Peterson specials were on, but they were on late. We were really young, you know. So Mum used to, sometimes she would let us stay up, but sometimes she would send us to bed, but we would sneak down and all three of us would hide under the table, the dining room table, watching the Oscar Peterson session. She knew we were there, you know, but she knew that we were so interested in this music that she would and then when it would finish, she'd say, all right, boys, I'm to bed now, you know. So yeah, there was a lot of music.
And that interest is still here now, and you yourself have been so instrumental as well with NYJC, because I don't know if many people watching know that you're actually a board member, and you've been on the board for almost the entire 13 years, and you've been such a key member as well. So we have benefited massively from both of you, from the artistic and also the business and the governance side of things. And so when you say can't believe it's 13 years, you know, you guys are part of the foundation. I'm wondering from that, I know, Julian, you went on to then set up the Julian Joseph Jazz Academy, and I was wondering if you might tell us a bit about it and what inspired you at that particular time to launch it.
Well, I have to be honest, Izzy. I'm not like you in that, you know, seeing the vision of education and planning for it and all of that kind of stuff. What used to happen was that ever since I've started, there's always been an education element to what I've had to do. I think that's become more of a reality. It's certainly an entrenched reality for jazz musicians today. When we were starting out, it wasn't such one, you know, and I know you got in there really early, you know, like it's a thing to get in there, but you know what I'm saying. I don't know, in some senses, I may have even resisted it, thought, well, you know, I don't know how comfortable I feel with teaching. But, you know, James would always say to me, you need to do this. And so I would do it. And then I would always find out that I really enjoyed it. So I started writing opera, and then the HMDT Music, who I was commissioned by for my second opera, said, you know, are you interested in putting together a school? And I was like, you know, actually I am. I would really, James and I had spoken about it, and I thought, yeah, I can actually see, you know, a point for me to do something. And as much as I was enjoying it, it'd be really great to focus on what it would be that I could do. So I was very fortunate that they offered me the space and the opportunity for it to begin. So, you know, Adam Eisenberg and Tertia Sefton Green, they said, do you want to do it? And I said, yeah, let's go for it. So between myself, those guys, and James, we put it together, and then we built a team. And the team, the teaching team was really built around getting, you know, great pianist, Trevor Watkins, to come on board, because his knowledge about the music is just unbelievable. And, you know, since we were kids, we've been sharing lots of music. So I really trust his taste and his knowledge about music. And so with Trevor, we, you know, had Byron Wallen and Tony Kofi, and then we developed a young burgeoning teacher called Alex French. Brilliant. So that built our core team, you know, with myself and James, the guys, Trevor, Byron, Tony, and Alex. And really, that's how we started it. And you know what, Izzy, I was very naive starting off, thinking, you know, that we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And it's the whole reality changes as soon as you start to do it. The practicalities, what do you do? How do you do it? And so I guess from having a space to do the teaching, to actually engage, getting the kids to come, the expectation is pretty high, and because we had a very high number of piano players at first. And so we had to deal with that. But then, you know, I just thought to myself, what is it I want them to know? And what would I like them to go away with? So Those were the questions that I had to grapple with in putting it together.
And what answers have you come up with over the last few years?
Oh, no answers. No, I'm kidding.
Good.
Yeah, I just thought to myself, what would if their parents came to me and said, you know, what do you want them to be? What can they do when they go home to their parents and their parents say, what did you learn at JJJA? What did Julian teach you? Meaning Julian, the collective. And I thought to myself, okay, first of all, all music is based on repertoire. If you're learning classical music, we know in jazz is repertoire. And, you know, when I was young, I was remiss in my repertoire. I apologize, everyone. I was not, you know, I didn't get it really because I was really just into who I was into, which was so limited. And thankfully with the guidance and help that I got, you know, I was into lots of music, but in terms of when I was learning my jazz, I just got kind of stuck in one place. It didn't do me any harm, but it you know, you can expand so much more. But I thought, yeah, what is it that they're going to want to do? So repertoire is the thing. And then, you know, repertoire is the canvas on which everything is built. Your harmony, your melody, your invention. So if that's really the core of it. And I just saw that that's the correlation in all musics, whether you're learning Indian classical music, folk music, it doesn't matter. You have to have the repertoire together. In knowing that, then you build a vocabulary into that repertoire and onto that repertoire. And it helps you think about stuff, it helps you expand. It helps your creativity when you start to make your own tune, you understand the template of things, and then you can build your own detail onto that template. Then you can start messing with the template as well a little bit later, but you have to master those fundamental elements at first. So that was stage one. Stage two was I want them to know about the music. Danilo Perez, who I was at Berkeley with, always says that when I asked him, what is it you teach your students? He says, first thing I teach my students, Julian, is to love the music. And so the whole point is for us is to teach them to love the music from the beginning all the way to today. And so between the repertoire and the love of the music, it correlates, because if you love any artist, you got to know some of their tunes. So our plan, our mission is really to try to get them to know some of Jelly Roll Morton, some of Louis Armstrong, some of Sidney Bechet, some of Duke Ellington, some of Benny Goodman, some of Jerry Mulligan, some of Bill Evans, you know, some of Wynton Kelly, some of Wynton Marsalis, just, you know, Charlie Parker, you know, Charles Mingus, you know what I'm saying. So it's really trying to get this comprehensive understanding of the music so that when you do go to college or you go out there, you understand the foundations of jazz through knowing jazz and loving jazz. That's it, really.
Absolutely. And that love is what propels a lot of us along. Like you say, that you might have been quite a shy person in your teens, but the love of the music eclipsed all that and drove you, and you weren't shy about putting yourself forward. I'm wondering if we might evoke a bit of, because when the three of us were growing up, the jazz scene was incredibly diverse. You know, in the 70s, we were really lucky, the sounds, and into the early 80s. And then, you know, a bit later on, it did sort of swing a bit to, pardon the pun, but it did swing a little bit to going a bit more conservative and not quite so broad. And they're even, you know, I think they're, and then back again. I'm wondering if we could evoke what an exciting time it was to be listening to jazz in the 70s between the two of you, Mike.
Well, you know, I think there's always a movement, and it's always a pendulum. It's this way 1 minute, it's that way the other minute. I believe we're in a fusion age right now. I think one of the reasons why, you know, a lot of the jazz that we heard in the 70s was fusion music. It was the elements coming together. Electronics was coming into music, because that was when synthesizers and keyboards were just starting up. So whether you were interested in electronic music, you had to be, I don't know, completely insensitive not to want to experiment with keyboards and find out what that was all about. And I think the traditional movement was it was, I think with everything, there's a creative explosion. But what was happening was that in general, many musicians like us were coming in fusion and didn't know the music. So you put some changes in front of us, we were terrible. It just sounded awful. So we actually had to reset and learn some stuff so that we could even sound half as good as the people who were playing fusion. Because, you know, they invented it. Herbie and all those guys, and Tony Williams and John McLaughlin, you know, they could play before fusion, and then they created fusion, and the you know, the elements changed. So a lot of people who came from fusion and would go into jazz, you'd be like, man, you're really wanting. So Ian Carr used to always say to us, I don't know why you guys all want to swing, man. We were just trying to get away from it. And I'm like, well, the thing is, we've grown up with all the backbeat and all of that stuff. You know, the kids call it hip hop now, but, you know, it was jazz funk, jazz rock, all this kind of stuff. And yeah, so we were just trying to really understand what it was that they had the benefit of. So I just think it's really important for young listeners and for burgeoning musicians just to try and be complete, to have a kind of complete understanding, a grounding in what's actually going on, because there's so many vocabularies, and at this stage, you know, from when you begin, whether it's, you know, before your teens or in your teens up to, I don't know, 28, 30, that a lot of that time is spent gathering these vocabularies and figuring out what you want to do with them.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree. And
so you're right, it was really colorful growing up in the 70s, because the pop music was amazing too. You know, Billy Joel, Stevie Wonder, Earth, Wind and Fire, Herbie Hancock, you know, and he was crossing both things, and sometimes you're just so surprised. You'd hear Narada Michael Walden do something totally pop, and then you're like, hold on a second, he's the drummer who played with Mahavishnu and playing all that complex odd time stuff, and then so, you know, most of the music and most of the musicians were blowing our minds. We were just thinking, we used to watch a series called Miami Vice. You remember that? Yeah, I do. Jan Hammer did the music to that, and then you find out what Jan Hammer can do, and you just like, hold on a second, there's so much to know. And Jan Hammer was Sarah Vaughan's pianist, you know, so there was a lot for us to take in, and we took it in fun, and we loved it. And you know, you'd hear musicians like Joe Zawinul and Wayne Shorter and Jaco Pastorius, and then you'd see where they came from, and you'd be like, okay, so this whole traditional jazz thing is not traditional jazz. It's what you got to know. It's the music. If you don't know the music, how are you going to make all that other stuff you're interested in sound any good? That's how I feel about it. Anyway.
I totally agree. And then I remember them setting up the jazz course at Trinity in 1999, and quite a few of the conservatoires were setting things up. And it would be lovely to get both of your take on the next thing that I'm going to share with you, which is that jazz education in the UK was very young then. So we had the academy, which was still a small cohort, and I was blessed with working with Graham Collier for a long time. And
Graham Collier, yes.
Yeah, we miss him greatly. And I love, you know, it's 30 years now, 31 years ago he set up the jazz course at the academy.
Wow.
And that lovely saying that of his, you know, jazz happens in real time once. And that's what's propelled us along. Every time we're talking about pedagogy, that's really at the heart of what we're all talking about. So there's the academy, and there was the Leeds College as well, which tended to be seen more as lots of light music. And
that's what they used to say.
Yeah.
Because I don't even know where the term came from. I don't even know. But, you know, if you're an 18-year-old kid getting ready to go to music college and someone offers a light music course, are you going to go there? I don't think so.
Would you go?
I don't think so. Sorry, James. You speak.
I was saying, well, what does that even mean? You know, light music. What does it even mean? You know, I've come across it twice actually. One when you know, Julian was looking at colleges when he was about 15, and again when we were dealing with there was something we were doing with Radio 2. you know, when we were still in our teens, and they were talking about light music, and I was thinking, what does that even mean?
I think it's partly that style of writing, sort of from the Dick Barton and all that kind of style of radio, that then became part of also the caption of, you know, orchestration and writing orchestrations, and then actually going and playing on the ships and all that kind of style of writing. It
Yeah,
didn't feel
yeah.
like it was representing what we were all doing in the
No, not at all.
20s.
But
And yet the people that were teaching on it were doing a lot of what we
yeah,
were doing. So
I mean, it sort of goes back to another reason why Julian set up the academy is because, you know, we'd go to a lot of the colleges that had jazz courses and stuff like that, and we would work with the musicians. And what we noticed is that that a lot of, and this is why we were so enamored with NYJC, because, you know, it was preparatory, and but we felt that most of the students at the colleges, they weren't jazz ready. They just weren't jazz ready. So, you know, that was one of the reasons why Julian set up the Joseph Jazz Academy, to make a cohort of young people jazz ready, you know. And
they are. They get. It was
now
great.
they are, yeah.
Come and work with us from the academy to come and work with us. So JJJA come and work with us, and then more importantly, then, you know, where they go after that, what you've given them, they're now going to Berkeley and different colleges and really make it. I mean, some of the alumni that you've got, the music that I hear them play now, because when they're in America, still following them on Facebook, and it's just breathtaking. And they were strong, but they've really grown into.
Yeah, but
You
the great thing about JJJA, which I also find, I don't find it with many programs, but I also find this with NYJC, is that nobody really leaves JJJA. You know, when they go off to do something else, they'll always come back. You know, or always involved, and always connected to the school. And you know, that connection to the school helps with the learning of some of the younger ones or the newer ones. I wouldn't say, you know, some people are just new to jazz and not young, you know, really young.
Yeah.
And you know, it's been really a joy to have that connection, because we run JJJA like a family, you know. And so it really is like a family thing. Our relationship with you is very family, you know. That's how we do and how we do things. And you know, it's sort of spread into all the people that go and come back and go and come back. And you know, we learned a lot from Sahana Gero, the artistic director of the World Heartbeat Music Academy, where she would do two things. She would have the older ones teach the younger ones, you know, or the best ones teach the not as good ones. So it you know, that there will be interaction between all the musicians. And the second thing is that she would always keep her young people, her young musicians, on the edge of their ability. You know,
Right.
and you know, sometimes it would be fantastic in a concert. Sometimes it would be disastrous, but they're going forward. They're always going forward. You know, and so, you know, when talking about the landscape of jazz education, you know, it's about really being serious about presenting the music in a cohesive and in a historical fashion, because you know that great phrase, always know your history, or otherwise you're doomed to repeat it. You know, I maybe shouldn't say this, but I was in a meeting, and it was and we were talking about music and about giving people money and all that kind of stuff. And then some people were presenting this music, and some of the other people that were on the panel, I'm sorry, they had no idea about music, especially about jazz music, no idea at all. And they were acclaimed of being jazz people, and they were saying, oh, this band, it's so new, it's so fresh, it's so this and so that, and you know, it was some mediocre stuff, right? And I said, you know, this is just sort of Ronald Shannon Jackson, you know, with tracing paper and this, that, and the other. And they were like, who? And I'm so I told them to leave.
Oh,
I did. I told them to leave because they just had no business being there. But you know, you know, it's just it's great with NYJC, with JJJA, and with all our other partners. You know, we're really serious about doing, you know, giving our sector a proper, you know, a proper slice of education, you know, and truly teaching people.
with you saying that about family as well, and I'm wondering if Julian might step in and grow the idea that I'm going to share, which is that a lot of people say they don't get the family thing. They just think it's sort of a byproduct, and they don't understand how important it is to the actual way that we generate the music, sort of the level of trust and the familiarity and having a tribe or a family. And I know that it's really fundamental, a heartbeat, the way that you compose and the way that you band lead and who you choose and to be on your projects. And I'm wondering if you might share a bit of an insight for the younger artists about how important it is to build that family, because it really serves your music well.
Well, all music is about trust, isn't it? Especially in our music, you got to trust who you're calling to play with you. And the ones who you choose, you know, you're choosing them for life, basically. Sorry to tell you. It's a lifelong commitment. And I always call music the other blood, you know, because once you've played regularly with somebody or gone on the road with them, you're linked to them forever. They become your family. So the people that you play with, there's a kinship. There's a kinship in sound, you know, there's a kinship in something that transcends you and transcends them. It's the combination of your spirits and your music and your sound that makes some other. And you don't realize until you do it how much you respect it and how much it just becomes intertwined in your complete DNA.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, so I don't know whether there's more to say about that, except that the people I choose to play with or to play with me, I love their playing. I love them. And I love them as people. And, you know, we have our ups and downs, but we get over it, right? We get over it. And sometimes, you know, it causes little rifts here and there, but the respect and the kinship and the bond that's made can never be separated. No. So, you know, whether it's in an orchestral setting and, you know, I know that I need, you know, my trumpet players or I need, you know, my saxophone players to just give that little pep, that thing that's going to make the difference. I know who I'm choosing. In my big band, you know, it's a family. They say that to me. They're like, what's going on, Julian? When are we doing the next thing? With my small group, with my trio and, you know, the core of all of my bands, you know, that's with Mark Hodgson and Mark Mondesi. And I've been playing with those guys decades. And, you know, like playing with Mark Hodgson, man, it's like, I don't know, it's like getting someone to open the doorway into the soul. You know, he's just so incredible. Yeah. In sound, in foundation, in ideas. And, you know, he is so strong and so sensitive that the bond that Mark and I have, Mark Mondesi, he has that same bond with both Mark, he and Mark, and he and myself. So, you know, that's an incredible bond. I'm very, very fortunate to have that. And, you know, Mark and I have known each other since we were teenagers. And, you know, since we played together, it's basically been us all the way. So.
And we hear that in the music, in that we hear by its malleableness and its immediateness and the sort of the way you support each other and respond to each other. You can't dissect it. It is of that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, there's sensitivities, nuances, and challenges, you know, because we all love to be stimulated with other sounds, things that take us to other places, things that trigger parts of us that we don't even know we have, and that you can't put your finger on, but you know that it'll get triggered, whether it's with Mark with Mark and Mark, or with other people. But with those two guys, I know it's always going to be triggered. So I live for that. I live for that.
So how does that disappeared? Oh, I'm back. Sorry, temporarily.
Okay.
Every now and again I vanish.
Yes.
Yeah, as a composer, I'm wondering how definite, when you write for the trio particularly, how definite are the parts? And
Oh, they're not definite. I mean, you know, you're a writer, so you know, it's like I try to write to give them as much space and as much leeway as possible. You know, yeah, I don't close them down at all. I mean, certain things need support in certain areas. You know, if there are certain hits or certain grooves, certain specifics that need to be dealt with. But those are quite, you know, quite easy to orchestrate, because, you know, as someone who writes for large ensembles, to write a detailed drum part does not help you, and it doesn't help the drummer. It doesn't. I mean, there are great stories of Vinnie Colaiuta playing the Black Page, or Steve Gadd playing anything you like, with as complex a drum part as you like, but they don't need it. They don't need that. Couple of hits here. What this needs to happen. I want a bass drum here. I want a cymbal crash there. This has to have a hit. This good. And then pretty much for Mark on Daisy, I always give him my piano part. He likes to know what the chords are and what the intricacies of it, and then he chooses what he chooses to play. Same with Mountain, with Mark Hodgson, excuse me. Yeah. So I give them as much or as little detail as they want to use, because, just to reiterate, it's about trust. And most of the detail is taken care of in the way I write for the horns, and the nuances and the dynamics, and the atmosphere. And the thing is also, what the bands love to hear is a changing environment underneath. So even if we know what we're doing, when the rhythm section can change the environment, because this is, after all, jazz, they love it. They love it, and I love it. I love that fact that you don't know always what's happening. You just got to, you know what needs to be executed, but you don't know how it's going to come out, what the alchemy of it is going to be. And so I try to write to include the possibility of different kinds of alchemy.
It's a little bit like having a conversation. The conversation is never going to be the same.
Absolutely.
2 days running, because all sorts of things influence that conversation in that moment.
Yes,
how does it differ for you when you're improvising within your own compositions? So do you see it as an extension of the compositional process, or do you go into a different sort of creative zone when you're improvising?
I don't know. I sort of think of it like a song, like a singer might, where, you know, I don't know, I'll go my way by myself. You know, here's where the story ends. You just kind of make it, you know, how you feel at that time. And if you imagine how Miles Davis might take a melody, he'll change, you know, ba-do-ba-dee-da-da-dum, ba-da-dee-da-da-dum, ba-do-ba-dee-da-da-dum. You know, there's this openness about how you interpret a song and interpret a melody. So I feel that if the melody of my interpretation has an integrity, then I can do what I like. I give myself that freedom.
And it's that lovely integrity that's often shared, and that's what a lot of our creative in the moment playing is hanging on, is that we know that we're all coming with that same level of integrity, but we don't know where it's going to take us. And that's the
We don't
great.
know where it's going to take us. But one of the wonderful things that I love in terms of playing with Mark and many of the musicians that I've had the fortune of playing with, whether it's Steve Williamson or Courtney Pine or Byron Wallen or whomever it is, if I'm going somewhere, they know they can go there too, and they know they can share in it, move the ball around, so to speak, or not. So there's always that sense of openness, that sense of, we can take it anywhere we want, or we can just keep it where it is. So I live for that. I live for the conversation in music. I love that aspect of playing jazz. And I guess that's why, as young children, myself, John and James, we grew up really, really loving the music of Miles Davis and especially the second great quintet with Herbie and Wayne and George Coleman and Tony Williams and Ron Carter, because that's the feeling those guys give you. And it's such a beautiful feeling. And,
All those
we were weird kids because we were seriously into that. We were seriously into that.
Come around and go, oh no, we've got to listen to that music again. It's like, well, don't come
Well,
around.
no, the interesting thing about that, Izzy, is that most adults, first of all, they would just feel like, oh my God, that's weird. You're just some strange kids. But people our age were just like, wow, that's great. I want to get in on that. What is going on? What's happening there? Or the people who were older who really got it, they were just like, it's weird, but I love it. I love the fact that you're so into that music and just would feed us with more and more stuff. So it's, you have to go with your passion, haven't you? You've got to just, if you're feeling something, you've got to go with it.
And what you said very early on, coming to somewhere like NYJC where often you haven't got peers your own age. A lot of the youngsters don't know anyone their age that plays to their level of ability and is as passionate about the music. And I know that Nick, who is our program manager, when he came to do the summer school in 2013 and 14, that he couldn't believe that he was going to spend a whole week talking to 45 other young musicians about jazz all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm wondering from the business side of things, because while you and I have been sort of busily doing, writing music and setting up teaching and various other things that I'd like to talk to you about in a minute about your polymath career. But I'm thinking from James's perspective, because he's been around sort of supporting a lot of the business side of things. And I'm wondering how much of that do you think has evolved over the sort of the last 20 years? If we think about jazz education and the scene itself changing, what about business?
The business has really really changed, especially here in the UK. In America and in parts of Europe, it was quite developed anyway. But it's the organization and the sort of infrastructure of the music that has undergone the biggest change, I think. Because when we were growing up, if Mrs. Smith had a son or a daughter, Polly and Jerry, let's say, and Polly wanted to go into dance and Jerry wanted to go into music. There's an infrastructure for them to reach dizzying heights in their chosen field, but usually in classical dance and in classical music. But there wasn't an infrastructure for jazz. There wasn't one. It was. Let's see how we get along, and then as we were growing up, do you remember that thing called rock school?
Yeah.
And
Right.
It was David, yeah.
And and that sort of created a lot of opportunities for people, and that's developed into a weird correlation, but into places like the Brit School and Lipper and created that specific infrastructure, and then going on into the industry. And in jazz, we just didn't have that. And knowing that there is a firm way of learning, because the way of learning, the schooling was basically through the bands. Like, you would join Art Blakey's band, or Elvin Jones's jazz machine, or or you'll go on the road with Billy
Yeah.
Eckstein, or this, that, and the other. And that's how people learned.
Bandstand.
Yeah, and going back to that whole family thing, that was very prevalent in that as well. And but also now, in terms of the business and trying to know and navigate what you can get from this, the importance of publishing and all of its income, the importance of how you, of mechanical royalties and the benefits that brings. So the exploitation of music, especially in jazz, because jazz is a widely exploited music that a lot of jazz people didn't really get into, but their music was used. Like, if you watch television, which people really do, like they did when we were growing up, you'd watch the adverts and you'd say 70% of the adverts had jazz music on them,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and seeing that as a career path, and not just as a musician or a teacher, or that there are many other ways of making not making your money, but making your career. I mean, that's one thing that we've done with Julian's career, is that our mother instilled, she told us, well, she instilled in us that there was no limit to anything that we did. And Julian has really sort of grabbed that, and he would tell me what he wants to do, and then we'll make it happen, and we have no sorts of limits on that. And sometimes it's really scary, we'll go into a particular situation and really not know what we're doing, but if we find a way. And the lucky thing about Julian and I is that we have each other, and we have our big brother John, and so that gives us a lot of power and a lot of stability. But in the also, a lot more professionals have come into the business of jazz, which is much better. Before it was a friend of this, and my mate knows this, and knows here, but in getting money and creating creating situations and funding, and it's not just going down the public money vein and all that kind of stuff. That there is some private money, and there is things in this situations in the city that can benefit everybody. That has come on a lot over the years. So right now, being an executive or trying to be an impresario and to be in the business of music, it's a great thing, because also the education, if you've got great education, like for me, as a manager, you need musicians from every situation. Like for composers like Julian and you need different colors. You don't want everyone from the same background, because you don't get those colors and textures, so
I'm wondering with that, Julian, especially because things like doing the radio program as well, and interviewing people and constantly drawing everyone's attention to what the scene is like now, and making sure everybody that listens is really aware of the broad range of different artists and what they've got to offer. I'm wondering what you think of the young scene, because it's great to hear that now the sort of business side of things is much more robust, and you can be ambitious, and I'm saying that you can make a living from being a jazz musician. I'm wondering what you think about the actual creative side of the scene, and if you could sort of evoke for the people that are watching what the scene's like now, particularly for people in there that are creating in their 20s, early 30s. What's the scene like?
Well, I'd say that just basic is that there will be a scene now, there will be a new scene after this one, a new scene after that one. There was a new scene when we came along, and the tendency is to think that you're doing something no one's ever done before, which is half true because they didn't have you before. So if it's you doing this stuff, it's new. It's got its own energy. It's got its own vibe. Main thing is to try to live your expectations and to bolster your ambition. And you can only do that, as if I quote James, is through productivity.
Mm-hmm.
The most ambitious people are the most productive. So there's a lot of interesting, creative, burgeoning projects coming out. Lots of people are just as creative. It hasn't disappeared. It has its own factions. There are some great musicians, and I think it's all trying to find its place at the moment. As a radio presenter, I get presented with a lot of music, and I have lots of young artists coming into the studio. Most of the young artists that I've seen, just have that urgency, that need to be heard, that arrogance that they're the best thing since sliced bread, which I quite like, to be honest. But at the same time, don't forget that don't think you're Charlie Parker if you can't deal with what Charlie Parker dealt with. You need to try and deal with the things that have come before you and try and understand what's important about the music, and why people like us go on and on about trying to get your foundations together, because it's on those great foundations that you can build something great. It's lovely that there's lots of brilliant ideas mixing and meshing out there, but it has to go onto a good foundation. And we're all trying to encourage that, and not at the expense of creativity. Never at the expense of creativity. Be creative, use your creativity, but the better your foundation, the more it elevates your creativity.
I think that's having a shared ambition as well as a group, even if it's a young group, having that shared ambition, it takes you as a group somewhere that you could not go on your own, and you suddenly discover something about your own playing that you never even knew was there, and it can only exist in that group situation. And so it's not, to see it as an isolated egotistical thing, which I know we don't, but sometimes when people talk about ambition, it's seen as an egotistical thing. It's not, it's an ambition for the group.
That's because sometimes as Brits, we have a problem with ambition. And I don't have a problem with that. The more ambitious you are, the better. I love it. Be ambitious, go for it, have no limits. James was talking about our mother, saying to us that there are no limits, and you have to what's the word? You have to cultivate that. You have to cultivate your ambition. You have to cultivate the fact that there are no limits, because you don't just jump into something. You have to develop your process. That's what we really try to help our young musicians, as I'm sure you do, you are. I know that. It's about helping really talented people develop their process to get better. And not only to get better, their processes for creativity, their processes for interaction, their processes for constantly moving forward and refreshing themselves and refreshing knowledge and, building ambition. That it's all connected.
At the same time, for us to, which I know you do at the Julian Joseph Jazz Academy as well as NYJC, it's bespoke, and that's the nice thing about working in small groups. You've got that, you can be light on your feet, but and also we see when people are going at different paces, and sometimes one person's got one thing together ahead of another person, and so on. Like, it can cause such unrest in the individual, but just to know it's okay, you just go at your own pace, because you will find it. There are many routes to the mountain.
And sometimes there's a really wonderful quote by Bill Evans. Let me see if I can paraphrase it. He says something to the effect that building something slowly and putting together the elements yourself, build something, in his experience, more poignant and you know, more poignant in sound and expression than sometimes somebody who just has it all together all of a sudden. Because sometimes just the amount of effort and contemplation you put into something creates something that can then be transcended. Sometimes when it all just comes at once and you don't have to really deal with it, it just stays where it is. All good and everything, but it doesn't get a chance to transcend because there's no contemplation. So sometimes going fast is not necessarily the most advantageous position for you. You've got to put in some contemplation.
So looking back now, as we round off, looking back, both of you, at your sort of 14 to 18-year-old selves, because that's the age of the people on the summer school this week.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you might say to that 14 to 18-year-old self that, you know, knowing yourself as well as you do now and where you're at, that you might have been able to give a glimmer? Or do you feel that you'd already got quite a clear idea of where you were heading at 14?
I don't think any 14-year-old has any clue as to where they're heading. All you can do is just enjoy the moment. You know, it's such a wonderful music, jazz. Music in period is wonderful. Just enjoy it. Enjoy every moment. Take in everything you can. The future will take care of itself. That's what I would say.
What about you, James?
I would say, if any opportunity comes, grab it. Grab it. Because the thing is that, you know, we all think, oh, well, we're not ready or this, that, and the other. Just grab it. You know, it'll make you better and it will make you ready for the next challenge.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, so that's what I would say. If any opportunity comes along, grab it.
Well, with those both fantastic ways of rounding off the conversation, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you making the time to come and visit us today. What a great way to kick off the summer school. I'm just going to say a few words to the people that are viewing, which I know that both Julian and James know. They've been working with me for beyond the 13 years of NYJC. And as we've all referred to, there's a deep love of the music, there's a deep love of the people, and the thought of young musicians who are in love and enchanted by the music not being able to take part in it breaks our hearts. So we work really hard, all of us, to make sure there are bursaries and that there are no financial challenges. So I'm going to invite our program manager on, who's also been instrumental in the new website, and he's going to give a quick rundown of how you sign up for the newsletter so that you can stay plugged in with NYJC, and how you donate so that we can keep that bursary fund really replenished, because as you can imagine, it depletes very quickly. And this summer we've had a lot of people saying, you know, because of parents being freelance, they're really struggling, and so we've benefited hugely from the bursaries this summer to be able to take things online. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so if you would like to sign up for our newsletter, it is nationalyouthjazz.co.uk/sign up. And if you would like to make a donation, it is nationalyouthjazz.co.uk/donate, and that will bring you straight to our donate page. And then to watch all of these interviews back, it's nationalyouthjazz.co.uk/online-resources.
So this week we're going to be inviting youngsters from the summer school to do a bit of a sharing at 5 o'clock. So we couldn't do it today because we've only just started, so there's not much to share, but there will be by 5 o'clock tomorrow. And also we're going to be joined by Michael Price as well to talk about his work writing for television, and Olga Fitzroy as well, who's the producer and engineer that I mentioned earlier on. And I think it follows on really nicely from our conversations that we've just had just now, because we've already hinted at how a lot of jazz musicians are present in other genres, and it's not just the straightforward turning up to a jazz gig and playing in a jazz venue, that there are jazz musicians on a lot of the television and film scores that people are listening to, and also a lot of the pop music as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing about how the two of them connect with jazz musicians and the important role that jazz music plays in their everyday life. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much, James. Thank you so much, Julian. What a lovely way to start the week. And thank you, everybody, for watching.
Pleasure. Thank you, Izzy.
Thanks, Izzy.
See you all tomorrow at 5 o'clock. And thank you, James. Thanks, Julian. See you tomorrow.